What's up, everyone, and welcome to the second weekly Q&A. Before I get started, I just want to say a quick but very important thank you to everyone that became a patron over the past week. It's only been 2 weeks since I started on Patreon, and we're already really close to my second goal of $500 a month. So thank you guys so much for your support, and I have to say one really huge thank you to Ryley Ameden. I am really sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I'm almost sure I did. But Ryley donated $100 a month, and that's insane. So thank you, Ryley. Thank you so much. If you haven't joined Patreon and you're interested, there is a link in the description if you want to check it out, but no pressure. Also, one other quick announcement. It took longer than I would have liked it to, but there are new Star Wars Explained t-shirts up on TeePublic. So if you want some Star Wars Explained merch, you can follow that link in the description as well. Okay, now on to questions. Andrew Siner noticed that Rakata Prime is in the map of the galaxy for the Force Awakens Visual Dictionary, and he's wondering if I think that we're going to see some Knights of the Old Republic lore coming into the new canon, perhaps involving the Infinite Empire. Yeah, and also Pablo Hidalgo confirmed that it does belong there on that map, that it's completely canon. I have to assume that they're going to be telling stories about Rakata Prime. There's no other reason for them to specifically include that one planet just out there in the unknown regions. It hasn't been in any other canon material so far, so I imagine, yeah, we're going to get some stories taking place on Rakata Prime or mentioning it, but if they're showing us where it is in the galaxy, I assume we will actually be seeing the planet at some point. That would probably actually be a really cool video for me to do. I should do that. Talk about, the history of the planet and what we could see in the new canon. If you don't know from Legends, Rakata Prime is where kind of the finale of the Knights of the Old Republic video game takes place. So it could be very interesting to see what they bring in. It could be the Starforged, the Rakatan race. Everyone's still holding out hope that Darth Revan will be brought in. So yeah, to answer your question, I do imagine that we're going to see Rakata Prime and probably more material from Knights of the Old Republic brought into the new canon. It's just a matter of time. Next up, my friend Elliot from Battlefront Updates and Michael Gehab asked, what is my favorite Star Wars game? It kind of depends on just what I'm into at the time, but I think the one that I always go back to is Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. That game blew me away when it came out, and I love just the Dark Forces in the Jedi Knight series. So, but I think the one I really latched onto back in the day was Dark Forces 2. I honestly probably would have put Jedi Power Battles on there at one point. I used to play that with my friend Chris all the time, and if you've seen our most recent gaming series, we decided, hey, let's play that again. It was a lot of fun, and instantly we realized how wrong we were and just naive in middle school when we were playing it, because it is so just relentlessly hard and just poorly designed in almost every way. But we did play through the entire game, and we're in the process of doing that now, and I think it's been really funny. But yeah, I'll stick with Dark Forces 2. Aaron Cooper asked, how do I cope with my favorite character not being canon anymore? I think you're asking just in general, how do you cope with someone that you loved in Legends, or loved, that used to be canon that was just wiped away and turned into Legends? Really, I think the best coping mechanism is to just read the stories again. Like, I'm currently rereading all the X-Wing books because I just adore them. And I was someone that understood the whole reasoning behind making everything Legends, so it didn't really upset me. I do certainly hope that they keep bringing people back like they did with Grand Admiral Thrawn. I'm still holding out hope for Revan. But to me, it doesn't make these characters or these stories any less valid. I still love the X-Wing books, but if you're looking for a better answer than that, maybe just finding ways to fit your favorite character in with the new canon. Like, really up until something is straight up proven that it couldn't have happened, there's really no reason that you can't go on pretending that it's canon. Like, the new canon hasn't messed with the Old Republic at all. So there's no reason to just pretend for now that all of that is canon, because it doesn't really have any bearing on where they're going in the future. And really, I think their best move would be to just say, okay, let's take Darth Plagueis and the Darth Bane trilogy and Knights of the Old Republic, like the best things from the Old Republic era, and we'll just make all those canon. We'll re-release the books under a new non-Legends banner, and we'll go from there. But really, I just think that the best way to cope is just keep enjoying the stories. Don't get hung up on what's canon and what isn't. Just have fun with Star Wars, because that's what it's there for. Sticking in with Legends, Leon Gaspar asked what my favorite Legends book is. So I kind of just answered this, even though I meant to save it, but the X-Wing books are my favorite series, I would say. But I also think that the Darth Plagueis book did the most for Star Wars as a book. It took some of the unanswered questions from the prequels, specifically episodes 1 and 2, and it answered so much. It clarified everything, and it made things make sense, and it took things that people were upset about, like midichlorians and Anakin's virgin birth, and it developed reasons for why all these things happened. So I think that book is a must-read. The Darth Bane trilogy is just all kinds of awesome. The Thrawn trilogy, you can't miss those. There are too many Legends books to count, really, that I think are worth your time. But if you're just looking for, I mean, you might just be wanting to know my opinion, but if anyone is looking for some Legends books to dive into, I would say check out the X-Wing books, Darth Bane trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy, and Darth Plagueis. Those, I think, are probably your must-reads. Ryan O'Rourke asked what I think a fitting end or death would be for Luke Skywalker. I really hope he doesn't die. Kind of in the way that one of the biggest complaints about The Force Awakens is that it's a rehash of A New Hope, or really the whole original trilogy. I kind of see Luke dying could be along those same lines, you might say, because if Kylo kills him, it's basically like Darth Vader killing Obi-Wan, or if he just dies of old age, it's like Yoda. But I'd like to see Luke find some happiness, knowing he's been just in this self-imposed exile for so long, and in both Legends and canon, like, he has a lot of trouble teaching new Jedi. So I kind of hope, or, I really hope he gets a Jedi Academy off the ground. I want to see him be the father for this new era of Jedi, and that would be really cool to see and interesting if we had, like, the prequels show the Jedi in their prime and then their fall, and then we have the original trilogy, which is like no Jedi, and then the new trilogy is the Return of the Jedi. So maybe by the end of episode 9, we'll have a new Jedi Temple, and we'll have a new Jedi Order. I would really like to see that. I hope Luke doesn't die, but if he were going to, it would be interesting to have him maybe sacrifice himself for Kylo. Like, maybe Snoke is gonna kill Kylo Ren, and Luke, because he loves his nephew, steps in and takes his place, and that kind of helps Kylo turn to the light, or I don't know, something like that. I guess I could kind of see a parallel of Darth Vader returning to the light in order to save his son. Maybe Kylo will return to the light because he sees the unconditional love of his family, that despite killing his own father, his uncle is still willing to die for him. But again, I hope that doesn't happen. I'd like to see Luke just live out his days and restart the Jedi. Okay, real quick before I move on to the YouTube questions, I wanted to answer one more Patreon question. John Sanders asked what orders 1 through 65 are. The short answer is we don't know all of them, but I'm actually releasing a video about exactly this on Tuesday, so I just wanted to give you a heads up to keep an eye out for that, John. Thank you to all the patrons that submitted questions this week. If you didn't see me answer your question here, I did go and answer it on the Patreon page itself, so make sure you go check that out. Alright, now we're moving on to the YouTube questions. Anime Guy asked if I could make a full list of the canon events of the Disney Star Wars timeline, kind of like I did that whole complete Legends history. And the answer is yes, I do plan on doing something like that. It's just a little weird considering that new material's coming out almost on a weekly basis thanks to the comics. So it's like if I make one now, it's going to be out of date next week. So what I'm thinking of doing is making that like a yearly thing where maybe on December 31st, I will do the whole from start to finish canon timeline, and then next year I'll do it again. So each year the video would just keep getting longer, but I could make it like a yearly special that I do. But yeah, I would absolutely like to do that. The Nerdy 20-something asked what my favorite crawl of the 7 movies is. I think I'm going to have to go with the original, just A New Hope, Episode 4. I guess that's just the one that I've seen the most, first and foremost, but there's just something about it that I remember seeing it for the first time and just already being drawn in. And I think it sets the stage perfectly. Like, it was our introduction into the universe. We didn't know anything else about it at the time, but this scroll of yellow letters told us exactly what we needed to know, and then they dive into the blockade runner being chased by the Star Destroyer, and we're sucked in. So I think that the crawl for Episode 4 is outstanding and did the job perfectly. Space Doc, who has a really cool channel, by the way, which you should check out, he asked if I had to cast a Knights of the Old Republic movie, who would I put in the roles of Revan, Bastila, and Karth? So Revan is a really hard character to cast, because he's supposed to be you, and he's also supposed to be the central focus of a big twist. So he's kind of hard to put into place, and I even Googled around to see what other people thought, and I think that the best choice would to be going with a completely unknown actor. But I feel like that's kind of a non-answer for what you asked, so I would go with Karl Urban, and here's why. I really liked him in Dredd, and like all we got was this from him. It was just his mouth. And I mean, Revan spends time in a mask, so I feel like Karl could carry at least the parts of the movie where he's wearing the mask, if that happens at all. And I just like the actor. So there's my Revan answer. Bastila, I think Emily Blunt or Gal Gadot, or Gadot, I'm not sure how you say her name, but the new Wonder Woman, I think either of them would do a fantastic job. Karth Onasi, I just don't like Karth as a character, mostly because he was just annoying the hell out of me the entire game. He's like, wants you to stop and talk about his feelings, and that's okay, but then you go to talk about his feelings, and he's like, I don't want to talk about it, and you're like, just, Karth, get it together. But I went with Matt Damon. I feel like he can play soldier but also be relatable and vulnerable, so I'll go with Matt Damon for that. And you didn't ask this, but I think that Darth Malak would be well played by Tom Hardy, because he did Bane, where it's like the opposite of Karl Urban and Dredd, where we got this much. So that it's basically the same thing. Darth Malak, and I almost said Darth Bane, but just Bane. I think Tom Hardy could play that pretty well. Lobo Films asked why Obi-Wan said he never owned a droid despite having R4. So yeah, if you remember in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan has an R4 unit. And then in A New Hope, he says he can't seem to remember owning a droid. I think I have a few explanations for this. First, R4 dies. She is actually ripped apart by buzz droids. So Obi-Wan knows this, and I could see him saying like, there's no other droid that I owned, so he could be. But the question still remains that he should recognize R2, you know? But I could see that as being one explanation. Or R4 may have been the property of the Jedi Order. Like, maybe R4 was just on loan to Obi-Wan, and maybe he didn't own the droid. So I think either of those could be sufficient answers, but really the bigger question is, why doesn't he recognize R2, or is he just playing coy? Like, maybe R2's paint scheme is very common throughout the galaxy. Who knows? Tommy Pelly asked, what is my least favorite part of Legends? It's kind of a toss-up between the Emperor being resurrected over and over, and just the massive amounts of super weapons that we see. Like, we got the Sun Crusher and the Darksaber and the World Devastators and, like, all of these super weapons, and they're both kind of the same problem. It was just a lack of originality in my mind. It was just, let's bring the Emperor back. Again, let's bring in another super weapon to threaten the galaxy. Like, I feel like they just could have done more. And that's why I didn't have a problem with the Yuzon Vong, because to me, it was a totally different direction. And I was just tired of seeing super weapons over and over again. And I thought the Vong were an interesting change of pace. But yeah, the lack of originality near the end is my least favorite part of Legends. Those are all the questions I have time for today. Thank you to everyone that submitted a question, whether it was on YouTube or Patreon. I'm sorry I don't have time to answer every single one. I wish I could. But if you want to ask a question for next week's Q&A, just leave a comment down below on this video or follow the link in the description to become a patron on Patreon, and you can ask a question there where you're going to have far less competition. You can also follow me on Twitter at Star Wars Explain, or follow me on Instagram at Star Wars Explained. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed, just go ahead and do that. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you.